The sun beat down mercilessly on the ludus floor as Cassia trembled before the imposing figure. Blood and sand clung to his skin, testament to his latest victory in the arena. The champion's eyes, hard as flint from years of combat, softened imperceptibly as he took in her terror. Around them, wealthy Romans laughed and pointed, already placing bets on how long the debt slave would last before being broken. The lanista's whip cracked nearby, a warning that obedience was expected. "I need loyalty, you need protection," the gladiator murmured, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Accept, and I will ensure no man touches you." In that moment, their fates intertwined in ways neither could imagine. Could a man who fought for others' entertainment risk everything, even his hard-won chance at freedom, for a woman he barely knew? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maximus returned to his quarters as dusk settled over the ludus. His muscles ached from the afternoon's training, but it was a familiar pain, one that had accompanied him for 7 years. He carefully placed his wooden training sword on its stand. The ludus was more than a practice weapon. For a gladiator, it represented the ultimate prize. When presented by a praetor, it granted freedom. The girl, Cassia, he had learned was her name, sat huddled in the corner, watching him with wary eyes. She had not moved since the lanista had thrust her into his quarters hours earlier, announcing her as a reward for your victory. The idea sickened him. "I meant what I said," Maximus spoke, his Latin carrying the faint accent of his Thracian homeland. "You are safe here." Cassia's gaze flickered to the door. "Until someone with more coin or power decides otherwise." Maximus nodded, appreciating her perception. "The lanista values me. I bring him victory and denarii. For now, my requests carry weight." "And what happens when you lose?" Her voice was soft but not timid, educated, he realized. Maximus poured water into a basin and began washing the day's grime from his skin. "I don't lose." 7 years since the Romans had raided his village. 7 years since he'd watched his family slaughtered, been chained and marched to this foreign land. 7 years of blood and sand, transforming him from a captured farmer into Rome's celebrated killer. From across the small room, Cassia studied him. "The others talk about you. 39 victories. No defeats." "You understand Latin well," he observed. "My father was a scribe. He taught me letters and languages before he died." Her fingers touched a small wooden bird hanging from a thin cord around her neck. "Then my uncle's gambling debts became mine to pay." Maximus recognized the bitterness in her voice. It echoed his own. "The debt, how much?" "More than I could earn in 5 years of honest work." He nodded toward a pallet in the corner. "You'll sleep there. I'll take the floor." Confusion crossed her face. "But the lanista said—" "The lanista says many things," Maximus interrupted. "Most are lies." He unrolled his sleeping mat near the door, positioned to intercept anyone entering. "I have no interest in unwilling women. That is not why I requested you stay here." "Then why did you?" Maximus paused. The truth was complex, even to himself. Something in her terrified eyes had stirred memories of his sister before the Romans came. The ludus breaks people. Gladiators through combat, slaves through other means. He gestured vaguely toward the other quarters where sounds of forced entertainment often echoed through the night. "I need someone I can trust at my back. Someone with no loyalty to the lanista." "And why would I be loyal to you instead?" "Because I offer protection without demanding what others would. Because eventually I will buy your contract." Disbelief shadowed her features. "With what?" "Gladiators aren't paid. Champions are granted purses for special victories." He moved to the corner of the room, shifted a loose stone, and revealed a small leather pouch. 3 years of savings. Almost enough for one freedom. "Yours," she stated flatly. "Originally." He replaced the stone. "Now, perhaps not." From beyond the walls came the lanista's voice, sharp with anger as he berated some unfortunate soul. Closer, the low laughter of Vibius, the ludus's second-ranked fighter, drifted through the corridor. Maximus had noticed how the man's eyes had followed Cassia earlier, calculating and cold. "There are worse fates than being a champion's woman," Maximus said quietly. "The lanista believes you're here for my pleasure. That belief protects you." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "So we pretend. We survive," he corrected. "Tomorrow, you'll bring me water during training. You'll attend to my armor. You'll play the role of the obedient slave. Eyes down, voice soft. The others must believe you're mine. And in return? In return, you remain untouched. You keep your ears open for schemes against me, and there are always schemes. You warn me of dangers I cannot see while fighting." Cassia considered this arrangement, then gave a single, definitive nod. "I can do that." For the first time since entering the room, Maximus allowed himself a small smile. "Then we have an agreement." Outside, the sounds of the ludus continued. Men training for death, others drinking to forget it approached. But inside these walls, an unlikely alliance had formed between Rome's deadliest gladiator and a scribe's educated daughter. Sleep eluded Cassia that first night. The pallet, though simple, was more comfortable than anywhere she had rested since her father's death. Still, each time she closed her eyes, memories surfaced like unwelcome ghosts. She clutched the small wooden bird hanging from her neck, the last gift her father had carved before fever took him. The smooth wings had been worn by years of worried touches. In the darkness, she could make out Maximus's silhouette by the door, his breathing deep and even. A man who killed for Rome's entertainment, yet slept on a hard floor to give her the better bed. 3 months ago, her life had been different. Not wealthy, but respectable. Her father's reputation as a skilled scribe had provided a modest home and regular meals. When he died, her uncle Drusus had seemed a blessing, a relative willing to take in his brother's daughter. The wooden bird caught moonlight from the small window as she turned it in her fingers. How quickly fortunes changed in Rome. Uncle Drusus's gambling debts had accumulated faster than his promises to repay them. Then came the night the debt collectors arrived, and Drusus offered what he claimed was his only valuable possession, a literate young woman, untouched, worth far more than the coins he owed. "You're still awake." Maximus's voice startled her from her thoughts. Cassia quickly tucked the wooden bird beneath her tunic. "As are you." He shifted to a sitting position, his back still against the door. "Old habits. I sleep lightly." "Because of the other gladiators?" "Because of everyone." The simplicity of his answer carried years of vigilance. Silence settled between them until Cassia asked, "Is it true what they say? That you were a farmer before?" "I was many things before Rome decided I should kill for their amusement." "And your family?" The darkness seemed to deepen with his pause. "Dead. All of them." Cassia nodded, though he likely couldn't see it. "My father taught me that grief shared is grief diminished." "Your father was wrong." His voice remained even. "Some burdens don't lighten with sharing." "Then why take on mine?" she challenged quietly. "My presence endangers your standing here." Maximus was silent long enough that Cassia thought he might not answer. Finally he spoke. "Because I recognized something in your eyes when they brought you in. Something I haven't seen since coming to Rome." "What?" "Dignity," he said simply. "Even facing what you believed would happen, you still had it." Cassia's fingers found the wooden bird again. "My father said dignity costs nothing but is worth everything." A wise man. He was. The ache of loss still felt fresh. "He taught me languages, mathematics, record-keeping, all his skills. Said knowledge was the one thing that couldn't be taken from me." A bitter laugh escaped her. "He never imagined I'd be sold to pay gambling debts." "Yet here your knowledge serves you," Maximus observed. "Many in your position would be unable to negotiate terms or understand their situation." "Is that what we did?" "Negotiate? We formed an alliance," he corrected. "More valuable than any contract in Rome. Morning would come too soon, bringing new challenges." Cassia knew the ludus would test whatever trust was forming between them. The lanista wouldn't simply allow his champion to claim exclusive rights to a debt slave without question. The other gladiators, particularly Vibius with his predatory gaze, would challenge Maximus's claim when opportunity arose. Tomorrow, Maximus continued as if reading her thoughts, you'll need to play your part convincingly. The others must believe you're mine in every way they imagine. I understand. But remember, walls in the ludus have ears. Trust no one. Not even you? The question slipped out before she could reconsider. In the darkness, she sensed rather than saw his slight smile. Especially not me. Trust what I do, not what I say. That's how you've survived 7 years here? Trusting actions over words. That, he acknowledged, and never losing in the arena. His confidence should have seemed arrogant, but Cassia heard the simple truth in it. This man had forged himself into something beyond the Thracian farmer he once was. Survival had demanded it. Try to sleep, he said, settling back against the door. Tomorrow begins early in the ludus. Cassia closed her eyes, the wooden bird still clutched in her palm. Her father had taught her to read people as well as words. Maximus, despite his brutal profession, read like a man of honor, a quality as rare in Rome as snow in summer. For the first time since being delivered to the ludus, she allowed herself to hope. Not for freedom, that dream seemed too distant, but for survival with dignity intact. Perhaps, in this unlikely alliance with a gladiator, she had found a path through the darkness. The ludus erupted with anticipation as the day's training concluded. Gladiator, the lanista, strode into the training yard with a scroll of betting odds clutched in his bejeweled hand. Behind him followed a corpulent man in a purple-trimmed toga, Marcus Decius Cotta, one of Rome's wealthiest grain merchants and a regular patron of the games. Champions, gather! Gladiator called, his voice carrying the forced joviality he reserved for the wealthy. Decius Cotta honors us with his presence and generous patronage. Cassia kept her eyes downcast as she collected Maximus's training equipment. For 3 days, she had played her role, the obedient slave attending the champion gladiator. The other fighters had quickly accepted her presence, some with knowing smirks, others with envious glances. Tonight's odds favor Maximus, as always, Gladiator announced, unrolling the scroll with flourish. 7-1 against the Syrian in tomorrow's contest. Decius Cotta's small eyes surveyed the assembled gladiators, lingering on Maximus. Your Thracian continues to make me wealthy, Gladiator. I've tripled my investments backing him this season. Maximus stood impassive, his face betraying nothing as the men discussed him like prized livestock. Cassia had observed this quality in him, the ability to seem present yet removed, as though part of him existed beyond the ludus walls. Perhaps a private celebration before tomorrow's games? Decius Cotta suggested, his gaze shifting to Cassia. I see your champion has a new attendant. A fresh diversion would please me. The yard fell silent. Cassia's hands trembled slightly as she folded Maximus's training tunic, but she kept her movements deliberate. Nearby, Vibius watched with calculating interest. Gladiator hesitated, caught between pleasing a valuable patron and maintaining his champion's focus. My lord Cotta, Maximus prepares differently than other fighters. His concentration is legendary, Cotta interrupted, as are his appetites, I'm told. Surely he can spare the girl for an evening's entertainment? I pay handsomely for novelty. Before Gladiator could respond, Maximus stepped forward. The girl is mine, he stated, his voice calm but carrying the unmistakable edge that had made him feared in the arena. A reward from the lanista himself for last month's victories. Cotta's fleshy face registered surprise, then amusement. The undefeated champion claims exclusive rights? How unexpected. He turned to Gladiator. Is this true? The lanista nodded reluctantly. Maximus requested her specifically. I find it prudent to indulge my champions before important matches. I see. Cotta studied Maximus with new interest. Then perhaps after tomorrow's games? When your preparation is complete. Maximus moved beside Cassia, his posture casual yet protective. With respect, patron, I consider her a permanent reward, not to be shared. My victories bring enough coin to justify this small indulgence. A tense silence followed. Cassia could feel the weight of many eyes upon them, Vibius, the other gladiators, the guards. This moment would define her position in the ludus hierarchy. Cotta's laughter suddenly broke the tension. Badavis, you've bred a true Roman into your Thracian. He understands ownership. He clapped Maximus on the shoulder. Keep your prize, champion. Win tomorrow and I'll find other amusements. As the patron and lanista moved toward the villa portion of the ludus, Cassia exhaled slowly. Maximus remained beside her, his presence a shield against the stares of the others. Dangerous game, Thracian, Vibius commented as he passed. Defying a patron like Cotta over a debt slave. One might question your priorities. One might mind his own affairs, if he wishes to keep his teeth, Maximus replied evenly. Later, back in his quarters, Cassia finally spoke. You risked much today. Maximus shrugged as he inspected his fighting gladius. Cotta values winning more than he values new playthings. As long as I continue victorious, he'll respect my eccentricities. And Badavis? The lanista cares only for profit. Maximus nodded toward the scroll of betting odds he had brought back to their quarters. Tomorrow's match has drawn record wagers. My focused preparation is worth more to him than lending you to Cotta for a night. Cassia studied the scroll, noting the sums recorded. The mathematics were impressive, thousands of denarii wagered on a single match. These numbers, she said thoughtfully, they represent your value to the ludus. Maximus nodded. Gold speaks louder than any patron's demands. From the doorway came a smooth voice. An interesting philosophy, Gladiator. They turned to find a lean man with intelligent eyes observing them. His toga bore the stripe of senatorial rank, though it was modestly adorned compared to Cotta's ostentatious display. Senator Gallus, Maximus acknowledged with a respectful nod. I couldn't help overhearing your economic assessment of your worth, the senator said, entering without invitation. His gaze moved deliberately to Cassia, then the betting scroll in her hands. It seems you understand the true currency of Rome better than most citizens. The currency of survival, Senator. Indeed. Gallus smiled thinly. And sometimes, Gladiator, survival requires more than strength. It requires connections. He gestured to the scroll. Tomorrow, I place my own wager on your victory. Do not disappoint me. After he departed, Cassia released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. He saw me reading the scroll. Senator Gallus sees everything, Maximus replied grimly. Remember that. Blood splattered across the sand as Maximus delivered the final blow. The Syrian fighter collapsed, his shield clattering beside him. The crowd roared its approval as Maximus raised his gladius toward the magistrate's box, a request for mercy rather than death. The fallen gladiator had fought well, and unnecessary deaths diminished the ludus's assets. The magistrate granted clemency with a perfunctory thumb gesture. Victory secured, but not without cost. Maximus limped from the arena, blood seeping from a deep gash on his thigh where the Syrian's blade had found a gap in his armor. By the time he reached his quarters, Maximus's vision had narrowed to a tunnel. The wound was worse than he'd let anyone see. He collapsed onto the sleeping pallet, breathing heavily. Cassia entered moments later, carrying a clay jar of water. Her eyes widened at the blood pooling beneath his leg. Without a word, she set down the water and moved to his side. The medicus should see this, she said, examining the wound. No. Maximus grimaced. Badavis will delay my next fight if he knows the severity. I cannot afford delays. Cassia pressed her lips together but didn't argue. I need clean cloths and something to close the wound. There. He nodded toward a small chest. Beneath my armor. She found a collection of supplies, evidence that this wasn't the first time Maximus had treated his own injuries in secret. Among them was a small ceramic jar of healing balm, its surface worn smooth from use. My mother's recipe, he explained, seeing her inspect the jar. Taught to me before. He trailed off, unwilling to complete the thought. Cassia worked methodically, cleaning the wound with practiced hands. My father fell ill often in his final years. I learned to tend him. The balm smelled of honey and herbs when she opened it. Its application stung, but Maximus remained still, watching her work with the same intensity he brought to combat. "You have gentle hands for someone in such an ungentle place," he observed. "And you have patience uncommon in warriors." She bound the wound with strips of clean linen. "Most gladiators I've seen would be roaring with pain or demanding wine. Pain is a familiar companion." His voice softened. "As for wine, it dulls the senses. I cannot afford dullness here." When she finished, Cassia sat back on her heels, studying him with newfound curiosity. 7 years. How have you survived so long when others fall within months?" "By understanding what I fight for." "Glory? Wealth?" Maximus shook his head. "Freedom. Each victory brings me closer to the ludus. Without that purpose, I would have fallen years ago." "The wooden sword of manumission," Cassia nodded. "Rare for any gladiator to receive it." "But not impossible." Maximus shifted, testing the bandage. 3 more years of victories, perhaps 2 with the right patronage, and I could petition for it." Cassia's fingers traced the edge of the healing balm jar. "And now? With your savings diverted to my contract." His gaze met hers directly. "Now there are 2 freedoms to secure." The simple statement hung between them, weighted with implication. Cassia set the jar down carefully, uncertain how to respond. "Why?" she finally asked. "You don't know me. My freedom delays your own." Maximus was silent long enough that Cassia thought he might not answer. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet certainty that made others follow him in the training yard. "In the arena, I've taken 39 lives. Some deserving, most not. Men fighting for the same freedom I seek." He looked at his hands, calloused, scarred from years of violence. "If I survive to freedom only to become like those who enslaved me, what purpose does it serve?" Cassia considered his words. "So I'm your redemption?" A rare smile crossed his face. "You're a choice. Perhaps my first real one since coming to Rome." She nodded slowly, understanding. In the brutal calculus of the ludus, choosing to help another represented a profound rebellion against the system that reduced them to commodities. "Show me where you keep your savings," she said suddenly. Suspicion flickered in his eyes. "Why?" "Because if we're to secure 2 freedoms, we need a plan more certain than waiting years for the ludus." She lifted the healing balm jar. "You've trusted me with your wounds. Trust me with your freedom." After a moment's hesitation, Maximus reached beneath the pallet and loosened a stone in the wall. From the cavity, he withdrew a small leather pouch. 3 years of blood," he said, placing it between them. "Victory purses, gifts from impressed patricians, bribes for certain outcomes that I accepted then delivered the opposite." Cassia opened the pouch, counting the coins with practiced efficiency. "Enough for 1 modest contract. Not 2. "Not yet," Maximus agreed. "Then we need leverage beyond coin." She met his gaze with newfound determination. "And I believe I know where to find it." Vibius watched from the shadows as Cassia carried water to Maximus's quarters for the 3rd time that evening. The Thracian's wound, though hidden from Batavis, had not escaped the notice of his rival. 7 days had passed since the fight with the Syrian, and while Maximus trained with his usual discipline, Vibius had detected the slight favoring of his right leg. "Interesting," he murmured to Drusus, a guard whose gambling debts made him easily influenced. "The champion keeps his woman busy with menial tasks. Perhaps his legendary stamina is failing." Drusus snorted. "Nothing fails about that one. The girl serves him in all ways, I'd wager." "Would you?" Vibius's voice lowered conspiratorially. "I'd wager differently. Notice how she moves, untouched, proud despite her station. The Thracian keeps her, but not as we assumed." The guard's interest piqued. "What concern is it of yours?" "Curiosity," Vibius shrugged. "And opportunity. Batavis has matched me against Maximus next month. I simply study my opponent's weaknesses." Later, as darkness settled over the ludus, Vibius approached the kitchens where an elderly slave prepared the evening meal for the gladiators. Among the cups set aside for the champions was Maximus's distinctive vessel, A simple clay cup marked with a notch on its rim. Vibius removed a small vial from his waistband. The contents had cost him his victory purse from 3 fights, purchased from a Syrian merchant who promised it would weaken a man without killing him. He glanced around before emptying the vial into Maximus's cup. "What business have you here?" The sharp voice startled him. Cassia stood in the doorway, arms folded across her chest. Vibius straightened, quickly concealing the empty vial. "The business of thirst," he replied smoothly, taking a different cup and filling it with water. "Even second-ranked fighters grow parched." Her eyes narrowed, noting his proximity to Maximus's cup. Without comment, she moved to the food preparation area and began selecting bread and dried meat. "He protects you well," Vibius commented, watching her. "One might wonder at the cost." "One might mind his own affairs," Cassia replied, echoing Maximus's earlier rebuke to him. Vibius laughed. "He's taught you his phrases as well as his pride." He stepped closer. "But does he teach you what happens when champions fall? They fall hard, girl. And those connected to them fall harder." "Is that a prediction or a threat?" "An observation." He took a deliberate sip from his cup. "No gladiator remains undefeated forever. When his time comes, and it will, remember who warned you." After Vibius departed, Cassia stood motionless, her gaze fixed on Maximus's cup. Instinct and observation told her something was wrong. She picked up the cup, examining it carefully, then sniffed its contents. No detectable odor, but a faint oily sheen caught the lamplight on the surface of the water. Without hesitation, she emptied the cup and refilled it with fresh water. Taking both food and drink, she hurried back to Maximus's quarters. He was stretching his injured leg when she entered, the wound healing well under her care. "Vibius was at the cups," she said without preamble, setting down the tray. "I believe he tampered with yours." Maximus's expression didn't change, but his eyes hardened. "You're certain?" "Certain enough to replace it." She handed him the fresh cup. "He spoke of your eventual defeat. Said those connected to you would fall harder." Maximus drank cautiously, then set the cup aside. "Vibius has always resented my position. But poisoning, that shows desperation. Or opportunity. He mentioned being matched against you next month." "Ah." Understanding crossed his features. "He seeks advantage before the bout." Cassia sat beside him, her voice lowered despite their privacy. "There's more. He suspects our arrangement isn't what others believe. He watches too closely. Then we give him what he expects to see." Maximus reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face with unexpected gentleness. The gesture, meant to be performative, lingered a moment too long. Cassia felt a flush rise to her cheeks. "How does that help?" "Vibius understands base desires. He expects me to be distracted by you, weakened by indulgence." His hand dropped away. "Let him believe it. His assumptions make him predictable." "While we remain unpredictable," she concluded. Maximus nodded. "You proved your loyalty tonight. Vibius would have succeeded without your intervention." "Is that surprising? Our agreement benefits us both." "Agreements in the ludus are broken daily," Maximus observed. "Yet you upheld ours when opportunity arose to align with a different champion." Cassia considered this. "Vibius offers nothing I want." "And what do you want, Cassia?" The directness of his question caught her off guard. She touched the wooden bird at her neck reflexively. "What my father wanted for me. Freedom with dignity. A life determined by my choices, not others' debts." Maximus studied her with newfound appreciation. "Then we want the same thing." He gestured to the poisoned cup she had described. "And now we know the lengths to which others will go to prevent it." The next morning, Batavis was furious to discover Drusus unconscious at his post, reeking of wine. The guard, unable to explain the gap in his memory, was flogged before the assembled gladiators as warning against dereliction of duty. Vibius watched the punishment with clenched jaw, his gaze repeatedly shifting to where Maximus stood with Cassia at his side, both appearing exactly as they should, yet somehow changed. The feast of Jupiter brought Rome's elite to the ludus. Batavis, ever the opportunist, had arranged a private exhibition of his finest fighters, not a competition, but a demonstration of skill that allowed wealthy patrons to assess the gladiators before placing substantial wagers on upcoming games. Maximus performed a choreographed sequence with spear and shield, his movements precise despite his still healing wound. From her position among the household slaves, Cassia watched the assembled Romans evaluate him like a commodity. Their expressions ranged from critical assessment to undisguised admiration. "Your Thracian moves well," Senator Gallus commented to Batavus, his fingers tapping against a wax tablet he carried. "I've been recording his victories. Remarkable consistency." Batavus beamed with pride. "Maximus understands his value. He trains relentlessly. And fights intelligently," Gallus added. "Most gladiators rely on brute strength or crowd-pleasing flourishes. He employs strategy." "The mark of a champion, Senator." Gallus nodded, making another notation on his tablet. "I've decided to offer him exclusive patronage for the Summer Games." The lanista's expression flickered between delight and caution. "A generous proposal, Senator. Though Decius Cotta has expressed similar interest." "Cotta trades in grain," Gallus dismissed. "I trade in influence. Which do you suppose holds greater value to a gladiator seeking eventual manumission?" The implication was clear. Cotta offered wealth, Gallus offered potential freedom. When the demonstration concluded, the visitors were invited to inspect the gladiators more closely. Maximus found himself surrounded by patricians asking about his techniques and training regimen. He answered respectfully but briefly, his eyes occasionally finding Cassia in the crowd. Senator Gallus approached last, waiting until the others had moved on to the wine tables. "Impressive display, Thracian. You disguised your injury well." Maximus concealed his surprise. "I don't know what you mean, Senator." "Please." Gallus smiled thinly. "I observe details others miss. It's why I've survived 20 years in the Senate." He held out the wax tablet. "I've recorded every match since your 30th victory. Your opponents, their strengths, the time to resolution, the techniques employed." Maximus glanced at the tablet, surprised by the meticulous documentation. His name appeared at the top, followed by rows of precise notations. "Why would a senator take such interest in a gladiator's career?" he asked carefully. "Investment," Gallus replied. "Rome runs on many currencies, gold, grain, information. The wisest investors diversify." He reclaimed the tablet. "I'm offering you exclusive patronage. My support in the arena and beyond." "Beyond?" "I sit on the committee that approves petitions for manumission." The senator's words landed with deliberate weight. "Freedom is more easily granted to those with influential advocates." From across the courtyard, Cassia approached with a tray of wine cups. As she served the senator, her eyes flickered to Maximus in warning. "Your attendant is attentive," Gallus observed, accepting a cup. "And educated, I suspect. Her posture betrays breeding above her station." Maximus maintained his neutral expression. "The lanista rewards me as he sees fit." "Indeed." Gallus sipped his wine. "Consider my offer, Maximus. Exclusive patronage has advantages beyond coin." He lowered his voice, "Including discretion regarding personal arrangements." After the senator moved away, Cassia lingered to collect empty cups. "Be wary," she murmured. "While you performed, I overheard him questioning the other slaves about your routine, your preferences, your weaknesses." "He seeks leverage," Maximus concluded. "He seeks ownership," she corrected. "My father served briefly in a senator's household. Men like Gallus collect people as assets, particularly those with unique talents." Later that evening, as the visitors departed, Batavus summoned Maximus to his private chambers. The lanista was calculating figures on his own set of wax tablets, tallying the day's profits. "Senator Gallus has offered substantial patronage," Batavus began without preamble. "Exclusive rights to your next 10 matches." "And the terms?" Maximus asked. "Favorable to the ludus." Batavus smiled, revealing gold-capped teeth. "And potentially to you." He's included a freedom clause. Maximus stilled. What kind of clause? Victory in all 10 matches would earn you consideration for manumission. The lanista's expression soured slightly. Though I'd lose my champion. 10 consecutive victories against whom? Opponents of Gallus's choosing. Badavis shrugged. He hasn't specified. The arrangement sounded promising, perhaps too promising. And if I decline? Badavis's smile vanished. You won't. This patronage elevates the entire ludus. Your preferences regarding the girl have been accommodated. Do not test my generosity further. When Maximus returned to his quarters, he found Cassia waiting anxiously. The senator's offer? She guessed. 10 matches for a chance at freedom. He sat heavily on the pallet. Opponents of his choosing. A trap, she said immediately. He'll ensure the final opponents are impossible to defeat. Maximus nodded. My thoughts exactly. Yet you must accept. Badavis leaves no choice. He rubbed his temple. We need an alternative path. Cassia hesitated, then reached for the wax tablet she had concealed beneath her tunic, similar to the one Gallus had carried. Perhaps I've found one. What is this? While serving, I observed the patron list. Her finger traced names inscribed in the wax, including the praetor Lucius Antonius. He oversees contract law in this district. Maximus studied the tablet. How does this help us? My father taught me that in Rome, legal remedy exists for those who know where to look. Her eyes held new determination. We don't need just coin for freedom, Maximus. We need the law on our side. Moonlight cast long shadows across Maximus's quarters as he removed the loose stone from the wall. He withdrew the small leather purse containing his savings and emptied its contents between them. Gold and silver coins gleamed in the dim light, the accumulation of 3 years of strategic victories and careful hoarding. 173 denarii, Cassia counted efficiently, plus these 6 aurei. Enough for 1 modest contract, Maximus confirmed. Not 2. Cassia arranged the coins into neat stacks. A typical debt slave contract averages 300 denarii. Mine likely more, given my literacy. And a champion gladiator's freedom? Much more. The ludus must recoup years of investment and future earnings. She hesitated. Perhaps 1,000 denarii, without political intervention. Maximus exhaled slowly. The sum was staggering, far beyond what he could accumulate even with years more victories. Then we need leverage beyond coin, he agreed, echoing her earlier words. Cassia leaned forward, lowering her voice despite their privacy. Badavis keeps his accounts in the small room adjoining his office. The ledgers contain every contract, debt, and payment. How do you know this? I observe while serving. It's surprising what people reveal when they consider you merely furniture. She traced a pattern in the dust beside the coins. Last week, I glimpsed entries while bringing wine. The numbers didn't align with what he announced to the patrons. Understanding dawned on Maximus's face. He's defrauding the investors. And likely the gladiators as well. Cassia nodded. Victory purses skimmed, contract terms extended illegally. Dangerous knowledge, Maximus warned. Men have died for less in the ludus. Knowledge is only dangerous when acted upon unwisely. She met his gaze steadily. My father taught me to recognize patterns in numbers. If I could study the ledgers, even briefly. Impossible. Badavis guards his records carefully. Not during the larger games, she countered. He's too occupied managing the arena arrangements. Maximus considered this. Even so, you couldn't access his office undetected. I could if I had reason to be there. If I were delivering something when no other slaves were available. Her eyes conveyed the unspoken strategy. If most of the ludus were occupied with a significant event. Like a champions challenge match. Maximus nodded slowly. Vibius has demanded to face me before the summer games. Badavis has agreed, the wagers will be substantial. During which his office would be minimally attended, Cassia finished. They sat in silence, the implications of such a plan hanging between them. Finally, Maximus carefully returned the coins to the leather purse. If caught, the punishment would be severe, he said quietly. For both of us, she acknowledged. But remaining as we are guarantees a lifetime of servitude. Maximus studied her face in the moonlight. The frightened girl delivered to the ludus weeks ago had transformed into a determined strategist. Her courage impressed him more than any opponent he had faced in the arena. I can teach you to move silently, he offered, and basic defense should you be discovered. You would trust me with this? She asked. I trust you with my freedom, he replied simply, and my life. The following morning, while the other gladiators trained, Maximus led Cassia to a secluded corner of the exercise yard. Under the pretense of having her help stretch his healing muscles, he demonstrated how to break a simple wrist hold. Your advantage is not strength but leverage, he explained, positioning her fingers against the pressure point near his thumb. Even the strongest grip can be broken with the right technique. Cassia practiced the movement repeatedly until it became fluid. Like this. Better, he approved. Now, if someone grabs from behind. He moved behind her, encircling her waist with one arm. The sudden proximity sent an unexpected warmth through both of them. For a moment, the lesson was forgotten as Cassia became acutely aware of his chest against her back, his breath near her ear. You drop your weight, he continued, his voice lower than before, and twist. She followed his instruction, executing the escape perfectly, but neither moved away once the demonstration ended. Something unspoken passed between them, acknowledgement of a connection that had evolved beyond their initial arrangement. The moment broke when Vibius's voice carried across the yard. Teaching your woman to fight, Thracian? Perhaps you fear she'll need protection from someone other than you. Maximus stepped away from Cassia, his expression returning to its usual stoic mask. She serves at the games next week. The crowds can become unruly. Vibius smirked. Indeed. Especially when champions fall. He twirled his practice sword. Our match approaches, Maximus. I look forward to becoming the new champion. After he departed, Cassia whispered, he still watches too closely. Let him, Maximus replied. His focus on me keeps him blind to our true plan. That evening, Cassia sketched a rough layout of Badavis's office and the adjoining record room on a patch of damp sand, committing it to memory before erasing all evidence. The risk is great, Maximus said as they reviewed the plan one final time. As is the reward, Cassia responded, her hand unconsciously finding the wooden bird at her neck. Freedom with dignity. Worth any risk. In the flickering lamplight, Maximus reached out and covered her hand with his own. The gesture, no longer performative for watching eyes, conveyed everything words could not. Whatever began as a transaction of protection had transformed into something neither had anticipated, a partnership based on mutual respect and growing affection. 3 days, he said softly. Then we'll know if there's a path to freedom for both of us. The games celebrating Rome's victory over the Carthaginian rebels drew unprecedented crowds. Citizens from all classes packed the arena, their combined voices creating a roar that vibrated through the stone foundations. In the officials' box, Praetor Lucius Antonius sat beside Senator Gallus, their contrasting expressions revealing different interests in the day's events. Your Thracian fights next, Gallus remarked to Badavis, who hovered attentively behind them. Against the Gaul, correct? Yes, Senator. An exhibition match only, no mortal combat authorized. The lanista's disappointment at this restriction was poorly concealed. The praetor's office has been conservative in permitting death matches this season. Lucius Antonius, a man of middle years with the serious demeanor of a lifelong jurist, turned slightly. The purpose of the games is demonstration of skill and courage, Badavis. Not merely bloodshed. Of course, Praetor, the lanista agreed hastily. Though the crowds do enjoy a decisive conclusion. They'll have spectacle enough, Gallus interjected smoothly. Maximus hasn't lost in 39 matches. The odds heavily favor him again today. Below in the preparation area, Cassia adjusted Maximus's armor with practiced efficiency. The other attendants had grown accustomed to her presence, accepting without question her exclusive service to the champion. "The praetor is present," she murmured, securing a leather strap. "Upper level, beside Senator Gallus." Maximus nodded almost imperceptibly. Gallus mentioned bringing him. "He's eager to showcase his investment. Or to demonstrate his influence over legal matters." Cassia's fingers worked quickly, checking each fastening. The praetor's seal carries significant weight. A single impression could validate or invalidate any contract in Rome. From the arena floor came the herald's announcement, calling Maximus to combat. He turned to leave but paused when Cassia touched his arm. "Fight well," she said, louder than necessary for the benefit of listening ears. Then, barely above a whisper, "But survive above all." The match against the Gaul proved more challenging than anticipated. Though physically smaller, the opponent possessed unusual speed and a fighting style Maximus hadn't encountered before. The crowd's loyalties shifted throughout the contest, appreciation for the champion's proven skill balanced against admiration for the Gaul's innovative techniques. In the official's box, Praetor Lucius leaned forward with increasing interest. "The Thracian adapts quickly," he observed. "See how he studies before countering." "Maximus fights with his mind as much as his body," Gallus confirmed. "It's why I've offered him exclusive patronage." "Unusual in a gladiator," the praetor commented. "Most rely on practiced forms." "He was no common slave before capture," Batavius interjected. "A tribal leader, I'm told." Lucius's eyebrow raised slightly. "Is that documented in his acquisition records?" The lanista's smile faltered. "I believe so, praetor. The transaction occurred some years ago." 7, Gallus supplied precisely. "Though by my calculation his term of service should have concluded after 5, assuming standard provincial conquest terms." Batavius paled slightly. "There were complications with his contract. Additional infractions." "I see." The praetor's tone suggested he very much did not see. "I'd be interested in reviewing those records, lanista. My office is currently auditing gladiatorial contracts to ensure compliance with the Senate's recent reforms." Below, Maximus executed a brilliant reversal, disarming the Gaul with a technique that brought the crowd to its feet. The match concluded with the Gaul yielding honorably, both men raising their arms to thunderous approval. As they exited the arena floor, Maximus caught sight of the official's box. The praetor was speaking intently to Batavius, whose usual confident posture had stiffened defensively. Later, as Cassia helped remove his armor, Maximus described the exchange. The praetor seemed unusually interested in contract terms. "The gods favor us, perhaps," she replied cautiously, aware of potential eavesdroppers. A slave appeared at the doorway. "Champion, the lanista requires your attendance. The praetor wishes to speak with you." Cassia's eyes widened fractionally before she composed her features. This unexpected development could either aid or destroy their plans. In Batavius's office, Praetor Lucius stood examining a small clay impression bearing his official seal. He placed it carefully on the desk when Maximus entered. "Impressive combat today," the praetor began. "You fight unlike any gladiator I've observed." "Thank you, praetor." Maximus maintained the respectful demeanor expected of his station. "I'm curious about your background. Batavius claims you led your people before capture." "I was a free man," Maximus confirmed carefully, "though not of high rank." The praetor nodded thoughtfully. "And your term of service? When did it begin?" 7 years ago, after the Thracian campaign." "I see." Lucius turned to Batavius. Standard provincial terms would indicate a 5-year service period for skilled captives. Yet he remains enslaved. The lanista smiled nervously. "There were disciplinary extensions, praetor. All properly documented." "Indeed? I look forward to reviewing them." Lucius returned his attention to Maximus. "You understand Roman law permits petition for manumission after completion of lawful service?" "I do, praetor." "Yet you've made no such petition." Maximus chose his words carefully. A slave's petition carries little weight without patronage or substantial payment. "An unfortunate reality," Lucius agreed. though the law should function regardless of one's resources. He retrieved the seal impression from the desk. I'll require copies of all contract documents related to this gladiator by month's end, Batavis. My office is conducting a thorough review. After they departed, Batavis cursed violently. Someone has drawn the praetor's attention to your contract specifically. His suspicious gaze fixed on Maximus. Have you sought outside legal counsel? How would I access legal counsel? Maximus countered evenly. I've been focused on survival, not litigation. Back in his quarters, Cassia waited anxiously. When Maximus related the conversation, her expression brightened. The praetor suspects irregularities, she whispered. This could work in our favor. Or drive Batavis to destroy evidence, Maximus cautioned. We must move quickly. Cassia nodded, her determination evident. Tomorrow, during your match with Vibius. Neither spoke the obvious truth, that their plan's success depended entirely on Maximus's victory. Should he fall to Vibius, Cassia would lose not only her protector but any hope of accessing the records that might secure their freedom. The ludus hummed with anticipation on the morning of Maximus's match against Vibius. Wagers flowed freely among guards and slaves alike, though most favored the undefeated champion. The rivalry between the two fighters had become legendary within the compound, promising a spectacle regardless of outcome. Batavis had departed early to oversee arena preparations, leaving his assistant Quintus to manage the ludus. Distracted by the day's logistics, Quintus barked orders at the household slaves. You girl, he called to Cassia, take these scrolls to the lanista's office. Organize them with the others. She lowered her eyes respectfully. Yes, master. The bundle of administrative scrolls provided perfect cover. Heart-pounding, Cassia made her way to Batavis's private quarters. The main office stood empty as expected, with the adjoining records room secured by a simple wooden bolt. Working quickly, she placed the scrolls on the desk, then slipped into the records room. Shelves lined the walls, filled with tablets and scrolls organized by fighter name and acquisition date. She located the section marked Thracian Campaign and began searching for Maximus's documents. The first scroll she unrolled contained the original purchase record, a standard military acquisition form transferring ownership of captured enemies to private citizens. Scanning rapidly, she noted the date and terms: 5 years service for skilled prisoners, with option for contract purchase after 3 years of exemplary conduct. 5 years, she whispered. Not 7. Deeper in the shelf, she discovered what appeared to be disciplinary records. The first documented a legitimate infraction, Maximus's attack on a guard during his first year. The second, however, caught her trained eye immediately. The handwriting shifted subtly mid-document, the ink shade varying between paragraphs. Most tellingly, the date format changed from Roman numerals to written numbers and back again, a common oversight when forging documents. Cassia carefully unrolled a third scroll, this one bearing official stamps from the provincial governor's office. The authentic contract clearly specified. The captive Maximus of Thrace, having demonstrated exceptional skill, is sentenced to 5 years gladiatorial service under standard terms of the Lex Emilia. Yet someone, likely Batavis, had attempted to alter the numeral V to 7 by extending the right stroke. The forgery was crude but might pass cursory inspection. Hearing footsteps in the main office, Cassia quickly re-rolled the documents. She had seen enough. Taking a blank piece of parchment from her tunic, she hastily copied the essential information and contract numbers, then replaced the scrolls exactly as she had found them. Just as the records room door began to open, she slipped behind a tall cabinet. Quintus entered, muttering to himself as he retrieved a ledger, then departed without noticing her presence. Counting to 100, Cassia emerged from hiding and quietly returned to the main ludus compound. In the training yard, Maximus was completing his warm-up exercises, his concentration absolute. She couldn't approach directly without drawing attention, but as she passed, she subtly touched her tunic where the copied information was hidden. His slight nod acknowledged the signal. She had found something. Hours later, after Maximus's triumphant return from defeating Vibius in a grueling but decisive match, They finally had privacy to discuss her discoveries. The contract was altered, she explained, showing him the notes she had made. Your indenture period should have ended 2 years ago. Maximus studied the hastily copied document, his expression darkening. Batavis has kept me enslaved illegally for 2 years? The original contract clearly states 5 years under the Lex Emilia. He modified it to read 7 years and fabricated additional disciplinary actions to justify the extension. This is why he grew nervous when the praetor mentioned reviewing the documents, Maximus realized. Cassia nodded. Contract fraud carries severe penalties. Batavis could lose the ludus entirely if this reaches the courts. We have leverage now, Maximus said quietly, but proving the forgery would be difficult without the original documents. Not necessarily. Cassia's eyes gleamed with new purpose. My father taught me that Roman contract law requires tripartite verification. 3 copies of important documents are created simultaneously. 1 for the issuer, 1 for the recipient, and 1 for the provincial archives. Batavis controls his copy, and mine was never provided to me. But the 3rd would be in the provincial governor's archives, she finished. Untampered and accessible to the praetor upon official request. Maximus contemplated this information. To reveal this knowledge endangers us both. Batavis would know instantly who accessed his records. We need an intermediary, Cassia agreed. Someone who could bring this information to the praetor without implicating us directly. Someone with legitimate access to the legal system, yet no loyalty to Batavis. They fell silent, considering their limited options. Most slaves and freedmen connected to the ludus remained dependent on Batavis's good favor. Patrons like Senator Gallus had their own agendas, potentially as dangerous as the lanistas. There may be one possibility, Maximus said finally. The praetor's clerk, I noticed him during our conversation. He wore the marks of a former gladiator. Cassia looked up sharply. You're certain? The scarring pattern on his forearms is distinctive. He fought in the arena, perhaps even this one. A former gladiator working in the praetor's office, Cassia mused. If he gained his freedom legally, he might sympathize with others seeking the same path, Maximus concluded. Hope flickered between them, fragile but genuine. The forged document represented not just leverage but legitimate legal grounds for Maximus's immediate freedom. If proven, Batavis's fraud would invalidate any claim he had to Maximus's continued service. We must be cautious, Cassia warned, tucking the copied information back into her tunic. If Batavis suspects what we've discovered before we can act. Maximus nodded gravely. Then our path to freedom becomes a death sentence. 3 days after Maximus's victory over Vibius, a messenger arrived at the ludus bearing an ornate invitation tablet. The wooden surfaces were polished to a high sheen, the wax interior inscribed with elegant lettering, a stark contrast to the utilitarian messages typically delivered to the compound. Batavis summoned Maximus immediately, his expression vacillating between pride and suspicion. Senator Gallus requests your presence at his villa tomorrow evening, he announced, turning the invitation so Maximus could see the elaborate seal. A private celebration honoring your 40th victory. Unusual to invite a gladiator to a senator's home, Maximus observed carefully. Unprecedented, Batavis agreed. But Gallus has taken special interest in your career. This is an opportunity we cannot refuse. You represent the ludus, the lanista clarified sharply. Your conduct reflects on my business. You will attend, you will be respectful, and you will secure his continued patronage. When Maximus returned to his quarters, he found Cassia waiting anxiously. The news of the invitation had already spread through the ludus. It's a trap, she said without preamble. No senator invites a gladiator to his private villa merely to celebrate victories. Agreed. Maximus placed the invitation tablet on the small table between them. But refusing would anger both Gallus and Batavis. Cassia studied the ornate tablet. The timing is suspicious. So soon after our discovery of the contract fraud. You believe Gallus knows? I believe he suspects something has changed. She traced the senator's seal with her fingertip. Men like Gallus maintain power by anticipating others' moves before they make them. The following evening, a litter arrived to transport Maximus to the senator's villa on the Palatine Hill. Batavus had provided him with clothing more suitable than a gladiator's usual attire, a plain but well-made tunic that disguised his profession without overreaching his station. "Remember your place," the lanista warned as Maximus departed. "You are there to impress, not to speak unless spoken to." Cassia watched from the shadows as he left, her concern evident. They had made progress towards securing their freedom, but each new development seemed to introduce fresh complications. Senator Gallus's villa proved modest by patrician standards but impeccably appointed. Mosaics depicted classical scenes of hunters and warriors, while discreet sculptures occupied tasteful niches. The guests, no more than 20, represented Rome's influential middle tier, successful merchants, minor patricians, and a few military officers. "The champion arrives," Gallus announced as Maximus entered the atrium. 40 victories, not a single defeat. Living proof that discipline conquers all. The assembled guests regarded Maximus with undisguised curiosity. Most had seen gladiators perform but never conversed with one socially. He maintained the dignified silence Batavus had commanded, responding to questions directly but briefly. As the evening progressed, Gallus steered Maximus toward a young woman standing near a garden fountain. Her resemblance to the senator was unmistakable, the same intelligent eyes and composed bearing. "My daughter, Livia," Gallus introduced. "She has attended several of your matches." "Your skill is remarkable," Livia said, her assessment clinical rather than admiring. "You fight as though you've studied each opponent's history." "Preparation determines survival," Maximus replied. "A philosophy that applies beyond the arena," Gallus interjected. "Livia applies similar principles to her management of our family's business interests." The conversation continued, with Gallus subtly highlighting his daughter's qualities while gauging Maximus's reactions. The purpose became increasingly clear. The senator was exploring the champion's potential value beyond the arena. "Freedom often disappoints gladiators," Gallus remarked later as they walked the villa's gardens. "After years of adoration, they discover obscurity awaits. Many squander their earnings and end their days as beggars or common thugs." "I seek peace, not adoration," Maximus responded. "A noble sentiment." Gallus stopped beside a small shrine to Mercury, god of commerce and communication. "But freedom requires patronage to be meaningful." A former gladiator with powerful connections, however, that man might achieve remarkable things. The implication hung clearly between them. Gallus was offering a path beyond the ludus, one tied to his family through his daughter. "You honor me with your interest, Senator," Maximus said carefully. "But my future remains uncertain while I serve Batavus. Contractual obligations can be renegotiated." Gallus's smile didn't reach his eyes. "With the right influence." When Maximus returned to the ludus well after midnight, he found his quarters in disarray. His few possessions had been moved, the pallet disturbed, the loose stone covering his savings slightly out of alignment. Cassia emerged from the shadows of the adjoining storage alcove where she had hidden. "Guards came," she whispered, "searching for something." "On whose authority?" "They claimed Batavus ordered it, but I overheard them mention the senator." Maximus quickly checked the hidden cavity. His savings remained untouched. More importantly, the copied contract information Cassia had concealed remained secure in her tunic. "What happened at the villa?" she asked. "Gallus was evaluating me for purposes beyond the arena." Maximus's expression darkened. He introduced his daughter. "I believe he's considering an arrangement, my potential freedom in exchange for alliance with his family." "A gilded cage instead of an iron one," Cassia observed. "One that would not include you," he added quietly. The implication silenced her momentarily. "Did you find it appealing?" Maximus met her gaze directly. "Freedom without choice is merely a different form of servitude." Relief flickered across her features before concern returned. "The search means they suspect something. We must move quickly with the contract information." "Tomorrow," Maximus agreed. I'll attempt to make contact with the praetor's clerk during the midday games. Neither spoke aloud their shared fear that the carefully constructed path to their freedom was narrowing with each passing day as more powerful forces took interest in their fate. The Flavian amphitheater erupted with thunderous approval as Maximus dispatched his 41st opponent, a skilled Numidian whose unorthodox fighting style had momentarily challenged the champion. Blood and sweat mingled on the sand as Maximus raised his gladius in salute to the crowd, their adoration washing over him like a physical force. In the patron's box, Senator Gallus exchanged satisfied nods with Batavus. The match had drawn record attendance, driven by Maximus's growing legend and the persistent rumors that the Numidian might end his undefeated streak. After the customary victory ceremony, slaves presented Maximus with his prize purse, a leather pouch significantly heavier than usual. The special exhibition match had drawn wealthy spectators willing to pay premium prices for the privilege of witnessing what many called the greatest gladiator of the generation. Back at the ludus, Maximus counted the coins carefully, adding them to his hidden savings. With this addition, his accumulated wealth neared 300 denarii, enough to approach Batavus with a credible offer for Cassia's contract. "Are you certain?" she asked when he revealed his intention. "Using your savings this way delays your own freedom. The legal approach through the praetor's clerk will take time," he reasoned. "This provides more immediate protection for you." The truth, unspoken between them, was that their situation had grown increasingly precarious. Vibius watched them constantly, his resentment deepening after his defeat. Senator Gallus's interest presented opportunities laced with danger. And Batavus, ever suspicious, had begun questioning Cassia's influence on his champion fighter. The following morning, Maximus requested an audience with the lanista in his private office, the same room where Cassia had discovered the contract fraud. Batavus sat behind his ornate desk, a pair of bronze scales and weights positioned prominently before him, used for counting the previous day's profits. "You wish to speak privately, champion?" The lanista's tone carried the false warmth he reserved for his most valuable assets. Senator Gallus was most impressed by yesterday's performance. "I come with a business proposition," Maximus began directly. "I wish to purchase Cassia's contract." Batavus's expression shifted from surprise to calculation. "The debt slave? Why would you waste coin on ownership when you already enjoy her services?" "My reasons are my own." Maximus placed his leather pouch on the desk. 300 denarii. A fair price for a household slave, even one with education. The lanista opened the pouch, pouring the coins onto his scales with deliberate slowness. The metal pieces clinked as he weighed them, his eyes never leaving Maximus's face. "Interesting," he said finally. "I've permitted your arrangement because it maintains your focus. But purchasing her contract suggests a deeper attachment. One that might distract my champion. My record speaks for itself." "Indeed." Batavus leaned forward. "Which raises the question, how does a gladiator accumulate 300 denarii? Your victory purses are generous, but not this generous." "I've saved carefully," Maximus replied evenly. "For 7 years." The lanista's expression hardened. "Your savings should secure your own freedom, not waste away on a debt slave. Unless..." His eyes narrowed. "Unless you've discovered something that makes her particularly valuable." Maximus maintained his composure, though inwardly he cursed the lanista's perception. "She brings order to my quarters and calm to my mind. That is her value to me." Batavus studied him for a long moment before responding. "Her debt transfer specified 400 denarii, not 300. A transparent lie, but unverifiable without access to the original documents. I have 300. Then you have not enough." The lanista pushed the coins back across the desk. "However, I might consider an alternative arrangement." Maximus waited silently. 3 high-risk matches. Special events against exceptional opponents. The purses would be substantial, enough to make up the difference. Which opponents? To be determined. Batavus smiled thinly. But worthy of drawing extraordinary wagers. The proposal carried obvious danger. High-risk opponents meant fighters selected specifically to challenge Maximus's particular style, men capable of ending his undefeated streak and possibly his life. If I accept these matches and survive, Maximus clarified, the girl's contract transfers to me. Upon payment of the full 400 denarii, Batavis confirmed. But should you lose any match, her price doubles. The terms were predatory, designed to exploit Maximus's evident determination. Yet they also offered a legitimate path to securing Cassia's contract, and with it, greater protection for her within the ludus hierarchy. I accept, Maximus said finally. On one condition, the arrangement is formalized in writing, witnessed by a freedman of my choosing. Batavis laughed. You've learned caution, Thracian. Very well. The scales on the desk gleamed in the afternoon light as Batavis drafted the agreement, the instrument that would weigh Maximus's life against Cassia's freedom. When Maximus returned to his quarters, Cassia immediately recognized the gravity in his expression. He refused. He countered, Maximus corrected. 3 high-risk matches for the additional 100 denarii he claims your contract requires. Her face paled. High risk means fighters specifically selected to defeat you. Yes. It's a trap, she said quietly. He suspects something. This gives him 3 opportunities to eliminate you legally in the arena. Maximus nodded, while appearing to accommodate my request. Clever. You must withdraw the offer. Too late. The agreement is drafted. He sat beside her on the pallet. But this approach gives us time to pursue the legal path through the praetor's clerk. Cassia studied his face, reading the determination there. Why risk so much? Your own freedom was nearly within reach. Maximus took her hand, a gesture that had become natural between them over the past weeks. Because freedom means nothing if purchased by abandoning those who trust you. The simple statement, delivered without drama or expectation, brought unexpected tears to Cassia's eyes. In a world where trust was currency more precious than gold, Maximus had just declared himself the wealthiest of men. Vibius lingered in the shadows outside Batavis's office, his ear pressed to the thin wooden door. The lanista's voice carried clearly as he discussed the unusual arrangement with his assistant. The Thracian offered 300 denarii for a debt slave, Batavis explained, disbelief coloring his tone. 300. For a girl worth half that amount. Perhaps he truly values her services, the assistant suggested. No gladiator pays such sums for convenience. Batavis's voice hardened. He knows something or wants something beyond the obvious. I've arranged 3 special matches to delay the transaction while I investigate. Vibius smiled grimly. His suspicions about Maximus and the girl had been correct. Whatever their arrangement, it went far beyond the protection pact rumored among the ludus slaves. This information could prove valuable to the right person. The opportunity came that evening when Senator Gallus arrived to discuss the upcoming games. Vibius intercepted him in the training yard, bowing with exaggerated respect. A moment of your time, Senator? I have information that might interest a man of your investments. Gallus regarded him coolly. The second-ranked fighter. Vibius, correct? You honor me with your recognition. Vibius straightened, lowering his voice conspiratorially. I believe your interest in Maximus would benefit from knowing about his unusual attachments. Speak plainly or not at all. The champion has offered his entire savings, 300 denarii, to purchase a debt slave girl's contract. Vibius watched Gallus's expression carefully. A surprisingly devoted gesture for a man supposedly focused solely on freedom. The senator's eyes narrowed slightly, the only indication that the information had registered. And you share this out of concern for my investment? Out of respect for your influence, Vibius corrected smoothly. Powerful men should know when their assets harbor divided loyalties. After Gallus departed, Vibius returned to the gladiator's quarters, satisfaction evident in his stride. Seeds planted, he now needed only to eliminate his rival more directly. The champion's first special match was scheduled for the following week, but accidents in training were not uncommon. The bathhouse provided his opportunity 3 days later. Most gladiators had completed their evening ablutions, leaving only a few stragglers. Maximus sat alone on a stone bench, scraping oil and sand from his skin after a particularly grueling training session. Vibius approached casually, a knife concealed against his forearm. The weapon, stolen from the kitchens, was small but lethally sharp. "Preparing for your special matches?" he asked, his tone falsely conversational. Maximus looked up, immediately alert to the unusual overture. "As I prepare for any contest." "Admirable discipline." Vibius moved closer, positioning himself to block the exit. "Though I wonder if your focus has shifted recently. The girl must be exceptional to command such a price." Maximus set down his scraper, his posture subtly shifting. "Did you want something specific, Vibius?" "Merely to understand what makes a champion risk everything for a slave." Vibius edged closer. "Unless she knows something valuable. Something worth protecting. Your interest in my affairs grows tiresome. As does your position as champion." In one fluid motion, Vibius lunged forward, the concealed knife aimed at Maximus's throat. Despite his fatigue, Maximus reacted with the instincts honed through years of combat. He twisted sideways, the blade slicing air where his neck had been. Grabbing Vibius's extended arm, he leveraged his opponent's momentum to slam him against the stone wall. The knife clattered to the floor as they grappled. Vibius fought with the desperation of a man who knew failure meant death, landing a solid blow to Maximus's healing thigh wound. Pain exploded through the champion's leg, momentarily weakening his grip. Vibius scrambled for the fallen knife, fingers closing around its handle. He slashed wildly, opening a gash across Maximus's chest. Blood spreading across his skin, Maximus seized a heavy wooden stool and brought it down with crushing force. The impact shattered against Vibius's shoulder, driving him to his knees. Before he could recover, Maximus delivered a precise strike to his temple. Vibius collapsed unconscious, the bloody knife still clutched in his hand. Guards rushed in, drawn by the commotion. Surveyed the scene, the blood-smeared knife, Maximus's bleeding wounds, Vibius's unconscious form. "He attacked from behind," Maximus stated simply, pressing a cloth to his chest wound. "With intent to kill." The evidence was undeniable. Attempted murder of the ludus's most valuable fighter would normally result in immediate execution. Yet when Gladiator arrived, his punishment proved unexpectedly lenient. 30 lashes and 2 months in the underground cells, the lanista decreed, avoiding Maximus's questioning gaze. The games require his participation once recovered. The decision made little sense until Cassia provided the missing context that evening as she tended Maximus's wounds. "Senator Gallus visited while you were training," she explained, applying healing balm to the chest laceration. "He and Gladiator spoke privately for some time." Maximus winced as her fingers probed the wound's depth. "Gallus intervened to protect Vibius?" "It appears so." She worked methodically, stitching the worst section with practiced hands. "The timing of the attack seems unlikely to be coincidence." "Vibius mentioned you specifically," Maximus confirmed. "He suggested you knew something valuable." Cassia's hands stilled momentarily. "Someone has connected me to the contract information. Or suspects we're planning something beyond what's visible." Maximus caught her wrist gently. "This changes our position. If Gallus protected Vibius, then the senator sees him as useful in monitoring us," she finished. "Or worse, as a weapon to be deployed against you." As she bandaged his wounds, Maximus gazed at the bloody knife the guards had left behind as evidence. A stark reminder of how quickly their careful plans could be severed by a single blade. "The first special match is in 4 days," he said quietly. "I'll be fighting at less than full strength." Cassia tied off the bandage, her face composed despite her evident concern. "Then we must accelerate our legal approach. Tomorrow I'll attempt to contact the praetor's clerk." Neither spoke the obvious truth, that their window of opportunity was closing rapidly as more powerful forces converged around them. The morning of the first special match dawned hot and windless. Dust hung suspended in the air as Maximus performed his pre-combat rituals, his movements measured to avoid aggravating his injuries. The chest wound from Vibius's knife had begun to heal, but the deeper gash on his thigh remained tender, a vulnerability that could prove fatal against a skilled opponent. Your adversary arrived before dawn, Cassia informed him as she helped secure his armor. A Macedonian. They're keeping him segregated from the other fighters. Have you seen him? She nodded grimly. Briefly, while delivering water. He's studied your previous matches. I overheard him describing your techniques to his trainers. This confirmed Maximus's suspicions. Gladiator had selected an opponent specifically prepared to exploit his weaknesses. The standard practice was to keep fighters ignorant of each other's styles until they met in the arena. This deliberate preparation suggested the lanista truly intended this match to end his champion's undefeated streak. Senator Gallus has arrived early, Cassia added, her voice lowered. He's requested a private viewing area. Maximus absorbed this information silently. The stakes extended far beyond the arena now. Political interests, personal vendettas, and their own desperate bid for freedom had converged on this single combat. As he prepared to depart for the arena, Cassia pressed something into his hand, a simple laurel wreath woven from dried stems, small enough to conceal in his palm. A token, she explained, avoiding his gaze. The victors in my father's stories always carried symbols of what they fought for. Maximus closed his fingers around the token, unexpectedly moved by the gesture. I fight for more than victory today. I know. She finally met his eyes. Return to me. The simplicity of her request carried more weight than elaborate declarations. He nodded once, tucking the laurel token into his belt, then turned toward the waiting guards. The Flavian amphitheater roared its approval as Maximus entered the arena. His 41 victories had made him a favorite among Rome's citizens, who appreciated his efficient, strategic fighting style. Yet today the crowd seemed particularly energized, responding to rumors of an especially dangerous challenger. From the official's box, Praetor Lucius watched with professional interest. Beside him, Senator Gallus maintained a composed expression that revealed nothing of his private calculations. Gladiator circulated among wealthy patrons, accepting their wagers with barely concealed enthusiasm. When the Macedonian entered from the opposite gate, Maximus understood immediately why he had been selected. The man moved with the balanced precision of an experienced Pancration fighter, combining wrestling and striking techniques that would target Maximus's injured leg. More concerning, he carried the distinctive curved blade of eastern provinces, designed to slip beneath armor at close range. The herald announced the special nature of the match. Combat would continue until decisive victory, with death permitted but not required. The crowd's excitement intensified at these elevated stakes. As the signal to begin sounded, Maximus adopted a defensive posture, evaluating his opponent's movement patterns. The Macedonian circled cautiously, clearly aware of the champion's analytical approach. When he finally attacked, it was with a feint toward Maximus's right side, followed by a quick shift to target the injured left thigh. The strategy was transparent but effective. Maximus blocked the initial strike but felt searing pain as his wounded leg absorbed his weight. The Macedonian pressed his advantage, forcing Maximus to continuously pivot on his weakened limb. By the match's midpoint, blood had begun to seep through the bandages beneath Maximus's armor. His responses slowed perceptibly, each movement requiring increasing determination. From her position among the ludus slaves in the lower viewing area, Cassia watched with mounting dread as the champion's legendary stamina began to falter. The turning point came unexpectedly. The Macedonian, growing confident, attempted a complex grappling maneuver to force Maximus to the ground. As they struggled in close quarters, Maximus felt the laurel token press against his side, a tactile reminder of what awaited beyond victory. Drawing on reserves of strength that transcended physical endurance, he executed a countermove rarely seen in the arena, a Thracian wrestling technique passed through generations of his people. The Macedonian, unprepared for this obscure maneuver, lost his balance momentarily. It was enough. Maximus struck decisively, disarming his opponent with a blow that fractured the man's wrist. The Macedonian, Fought on valiantly but without his weapon and primary striking hand, the outcome became inevitable. When the final moment came, Maximus stood over his defeated opponent, Gladius poised for the killing stroke. The crowd held its collective breath, sensing the gravity of the moment. Rather than delivering death, Maximus raised his blade toward the official's box, requesting mercy for a worthy adversary. Praetor Lucius immediately signaled clemency. Senator Gallus, after a calculated pause, joined the gesture. The crowd erupted in approval, their admiration for the champion reaching new heights. Not only had he maintained his undefeated record against extraordinary odds, but he had demonstrated the magnanimity that separated legends from mere fighters. As arena slaves helped the Macedonian from the field, Maximus knelt briefly, ostensibly to recover his breath. In that private moment, he touched the laurel token at his belt, acknowledging the strength it had provided in his darkest moment. When he raised his eyes to the stands, he found Cassia watching him, her composed expression belying the emotion visible even at a distance. He had survived the first trial, but the cost was etched in the blood staining the sand beneath him and the knowledge that 2 more such challenges remained. The physician's verdict was grim. Maximus's wounds from both Vibius's attack and the Macedonian match had reopened, complicating his recovery. The second special match, scheduled for 10 days hence, would find him at diminished capacity. A delay would be prudent, the physician advised Badavus. Another week of healing could mean the difference between victory and defeat. The game schedule is fixed, the lanista replied dismissively. The champion fights as arranged. That evening, as Cassia applied fresh poultices to Maximus's injuries, their usual roles reversed. Now she projected strength while he battled pain and uncertainty. There isn't enough time, he acknowledged, wincing as she cleaned the thigh wound. Even at my best, the next opponent would be challenging. Like this. Then we must accelerate the legal approach, she replied, her voice steady despite her fear. We can't rely solely on these matches. When Maximus finally slept, aided by medicinal herbs, Cassia retrieved a small bundle from beneath her pallet. Inside lay several scraps of parchment, a stylus, and a small ink pot, materials she had gradually accumulated over weeks of careful observation and minor thefts from the Lanista's stores. Working by lamplight, she began drafting a formal legal petition to Praetor Lucius. Her father's training in legal documentation guided her hand as she composed the precise, formal language required for official consideration. To the Honorable Praetor Lucius Antonius, Administrator of Justice for the Provincial District of Rome, she began, her lettering small but meticulously formed. This petition submitted in accordance with the Lex Aemilia regarding contractual disputes and claims of fraudulent indenture. She worked through the night, carefully documenting the evidence of contract fraud discovered in Badavus's records. The petition outlined the original 5-year term of service, the altered documents extending it to 7 years, and cited specific violations of Roman contract law. By dawn, the completed petition formed a compact scroll, thin enough to be concealed yet comprehensive enough to warrant serious legal consideration. The challenge now was delivery. As a debt slave, Cassia couldn't approach the praetor directly, and entrusting the document to another slave risked betrayal. Their opportunity came unexpectedly later that day. While delivering water to the training yard, Cassia noticed a middle-aged man observing the gladiators practice. His modest toga marked him as a civil servant, but the distinctive scarring on his forearms confirmed Maximus's earlier observation. He had once fought in the arena. When the man moved to a quiet corner to review documents, Cassia approached with a water cup. "Refreshment, sir?" "Thank you." He accepted without looking up, then paused, noticing her careful diction. "You're not the usual water bearer." "I serve the champion Maximus," she explained, gathering her courage, "who I believe once shared something in common with you." The man's eyes narrowed slightly, taking in her meaning and glancing at his own scarred arms. "Did he send you?" "He fights injured in the special matches," she replied indirectly, "against opponents selected to exploit his weaknesses. The ways of the ludus are not my concern anymore." Despite his words, a flicker of understanding crossed his features. "Of course." Cassia hesitated, then continued softly, "But perhaps the laws governing gladiatorial contracts remain of professional interest to one who serves the praetor's office?" The man studied her more carefully now. "You're well spoken for a ludus slave. My father was a scribe who taught me letters and law before his death." She met his gaze directly. "Including the lex Emilia provisions regarding fraudulent extension of service terms." Something shifted in his expression. Recognition of a shared experience, perhaps. "I am Marcus Tullius," he offered finally, "chief clerk to Praetor Lucius. I handle documentation for his legal reviews." "A position of considerable trust," Cassia acknowledged. "Hard-earned." He touched the scars on his arm briefly. 5 years in the arena, 3 more proving my value as a freedman." The parallel to Maximus's situation hung unspoken between them. Cassia took a calculated risk. If someone had evidence of contract fraud that kept a fighter enslaved beyond legal terms, how might such documentation reach the praetor's review? Marcus's expression remained neutral, but his voice lowered. "Hypothetically, such evidence would require formal petition, properly formatted according to provincial standards. The praetor reviews all such documents personally on the calends of each month. And if the petitioner cannot appear in person, official petitions may be submitted through the records office." He paused meaningfully. "I review all submissions for completeness before they reach the praetor's desk." Cassia nodded slightly, understanding. "A valuable service to justice." "Indeed." Marcus stood, gathering his documents. "I inspect the ludus records weekly as part of the praetor's ongoing audit. I'll return in 3 days to continue the review." That night, Cassia showed Maximus the completed petition scroll. "The praetor's clerk was a gladiator once," she explained. "He offered indirect help without committing himself explicitly." Maximus examined the document, impressed by its professional appearance. "Your father taught you well. He believed justice required precise language." She indicated specific sections. "I've included the contract numbers, dates of alteration, and cited the relevant laws. Regarding fraudulent indenture, will it be enough?" "Potentially, if accompanied by the original documents from the provincial archives." She rolled the petition carefully. "But Gallus sits on the manumission committee. If he opposes the petition, then we still need the matches as leverage," Maximus concluded. Both approaches must proceed. They considered the risks soberly. The petition created a legal record that could protect them or endanger them, depending on whose hands controlled the process. If Gallus discovered their legal maneuver before it reached formal review, he could intervene to protect his interests. 3 days until the clerk returns," Cassia noted, "and 7 until my next match." Maximus grimaced as pain shot through his leg. "Neither option guarantees success. But together they improve our chances." She secured the petition in a small leather pouch, then attached it to the cord holding her wooden bird pendant. Freedom rarely comes from a single path. The petition scroll represented their most dangerous gambit yet, a direct legal challenge to the system that held them captive. Unlike the arena, where victory depended on strength and skill, this battlefield required navigating complex political and legal territories where they held little power. Yet in the carefully crafted document lay perhaps their best hope, the appeal to Rome's own laws to deliver the justice it theoretically promised to all within its domain. Marcus Tullius did not return to the ludus after 3 days. Nor after 5. By the 7th day, with Maximus's second special match looming the following morning, Cassia's anxiety had transformed into grim certainty. Something had interfered with their legal strategy. Perhaps he simply delayed his inspection, Maximus suggested as she checked his armor straps one final time before the match. Or perhaps someone ensured he wouldn't return at all. Cassia's fingers worked methodically, testing each fastening with particular attention to those protecting his injured leg. "The petition remains hidden. We can still find another way to deliver it." They both recognized the hollow optimism in her words. The praetor's clerk had represented their best chance of circumventing the political barriers between slaves and legal remedy. As dawn broke, Batavus himself arrived at Maximus's quarters, an unusual departure from routine. Typically, guards escorted fighters to the arena while the lanista managed business affairs. "Champion," he greeted with artificial warmth. "A moment before your departure." Maximus nodded for Cassia to continue her preparations, keeping her within earshot but away from the lanista's direct attention. "Your performance against the Macedonian impressed many important people," Batavis began, settling himself on a wooden stool. "Particularly Senator Gallus." "The senator's approval means little to me," Maximus replied evenly. "It should." The lanista's smile tightened. "Because he's made a surprising proposition. One that changes our arrangement regarding the girl." Cassia's hands stilled momentarily before resuming their work, her posture betraying nothing. "Our agreement is already established," Maximus reminded him. "2 more victories for her contract." "Circumstances change." Batavis leaned forward. "Senator Gallus has purchased the girl's contract outright. For 600 denarii, a remarkably generous sum." The revelation landed like a physical blow. Maximus maintained his composed expression through years of discipline, but Cassia couldn't entirely suppress her sharp intake of breath. "When?" Maximus asked, his voice deceptively calm. "The transaction was completed yesterday." Batavis seemed to relish delivering the news. "The girl transfers to the senator's household immediately after today's match." "Our written agreement was between you and me," the lanista interrupted. "I cannot sell what I no longer own." The calculated betrayal was breathtaking in its simplicity. By selling Cassia's contract to a third party, Batavis had voided their arrangement while appearing to follow business protocol. "The senator wishes to reward your victories," Batavis continued smoothly. "He plans to present her as a gift to his daughter Livia, who requires an educated household slave." The true purpose remained unspoken but clear. Removing Cassia would eliminate whatever leverage she represented while simultaneously isolating Maximus. A masterful strategic move worthy of the political arena. "And if I refuse to fight?" Maximus asked. Batavis's pretense of collegiality vanished. "Then you forfeit your own path to freedom, break faith with the patrons who've wagered on your victory, and still lose the girl. The transfer of ownership is already recorded with the provincial administrator." After the lanista departed, Cassia approached Maximus, her face carefully composed despite the devastating news. "He's lying," she said quietly. "About the timing. I believe the contract was transferred days ago, likely why Marcus Tullius never returned." Maximus nodded, having reached the same conclusion. "Gallus must have discovered our intentions. Which means the petition is now useless." She touched the hidden scroll beneath her tunic. "Even if it reached the praetor, Gallus would intervene before any ruling." They stood in silence, the carefully constructed paths to freedom collapsing around them. The legal approach was blocked. The financial arrangement had been circumvented. All that remained was Maximus's performance in the arena, now divorced from its original purpose. "I could refuse to fight," he said finally, "and face execution for defying the lanista and disappointing the crowd." Cassia shook her head. "That helps neither of us." A guard appeared at the doorway. "Time, champion. The crowd grows restless." As Maximus gathered his weapons, Cassia made a swift decision. She removed the leather cord holding her wooden bird pendant and the hidden petition scroll. "Take this," she whispered, pressing them into his hand. "Keep them safe until we find another way." He closed his fingers around the items, their weight disproportionate to their size. "I will find you," he promised, his voice low but resolute. "Whatever house holds you, whatever guards surround you. I know." Her composure finally cracked, revealing the depth of emotion beneath. "But first you must survive." The guard called again, more insistently. As Maximus moved to leave, he noticed something unusual about his armor, a subtle wrongness in how the straps lay against his chest. "The fastenings," he murmured, examining them more closely. "They've been tampered with." Cassia inspected the leather bindings and discovered fine cuts partially severing crucial support straps, damage designed to go unnoticed until combat stress caused catastrophic failure. "Sabotage," she confirmed, quickly replacing the compromised straps with spares from his. Training gear. Had you entered the arena like this? The implications were clear. Someone, likely acting on Gallus's or Batavis's orders, had ensured Maximus would face his opponent with failing armor. A death that would appear as honorable combat rather than assassination. The game grows deadlier, Maximus observed grimly. And more desperate, Cassia agreed. Which means we're becoming a genuine threat to their interests. Despite the betrayals and dangers closing around them, this realization carried a certain validation. Their efforts had rattled those in power enough to provoke increasingly direct countermeasures. As the final call came for Maximus to enter the arena, Cassia touched his arm one last time. "Remember what you fight for now," she said. "Not my contract, but our future." The Flavian amphitheater had never seemed so vast to Maximus as he entered the arena for his 43rd combat. The wooden bird pendant and hidden petition scroll rested against his chest beneath his armor, physical reminders of what truly stood at stake. His repaired armor felt secure, but the knowledge that someone had attempted to ensure his death before he even faced his opponent sharpened his vigilance to painful intensity. From the official's box, Senator Gallus watched with calculated interest. Beside him sat his daughter Livia, her expression coolly appraising. To their left, Praetor Lucius appeared troubled, his conversation with Gallus marked by visible tension. The crowd's roar reached deafening levels as the opposing gate opened. When Maximus's opponent stepped into the sunlight, a collective gasp swept through the audience, followed by heightened excitement. The man stood nearly 7 feet tall, his Germanic heritage evident in his pale coloring and massive frame. The scars covering his body told a story of countless victories, each marked permanently in flesh. "Tutobod of the Cimbri," the herald announced. 37 victories. 37 deaths. The crowd's reaction confirmed what Maximus already understood. Batavis had selected not merely a challenging opponent, but a legendary killer who had never permitted an adversary to leave the arena alive. As they faced each other for the ritual salute, Tutobod's eyes revealed neither malice nor emotion, only the detached focus of a man who viewed combat as methodical slaughter. His gladius appeared almost small in his massive hand, supplemented by a spiked cestus on his left fist. The signal to begin came almost as a relief after the tension of anticipation. Maximus adopted a defensive posture, circling carefully to assess his opponent's movement patterns. The German size suggested power at the cost of speed, a miscalculation that nearly proved fatal when Tutobod lunged with unexpected agility. Maximus barely evaded the thrust, the blade passing close enough to his face that he felt its displacement of air. The counterstrike he delivered against the German's arm should have been decisive, but the man seemed impervious to pain, continuing his attack without hesitation. What followed was the most grueling combat of Maximus's career. Every strategy he employed met with either brutal counters or inhuman endurance. When he successfully landed what should have been crippling blows, Tutobod absorbed the damage and pressed forward relentlessly. By the fight's midpoint, Maximus's earlier wounds had reopened, blood seeping through his armor at thigh and chest. His breathing came in controlled but labored gasps as he narrowly avoided a sweeping strike that would have severed his leg at the knee. In the slaves' viewing section, Cassia watched with increasing despair. Batavis stood nearby, his satisfied expression confirming that this match had been designed specifically to end Maximus's undefeated record, and likely his life. The turning point came when Tutobod's cestus connected with Maximus's shield, the impact splintering the wooden structure and driving fragments into the champion's arm. The shield fell useless to the sand as Maximus staggered backward, now critically disadvantaged. The German pressed his advantage, driving Maximus toward the arena wall. A sweeping blow from the cestus caught him across the ribs, the sickening crack audible even above the crowd's frenzy. Maximus fell to one knee, his gladius barely deflecting a downward strike that would have split his skull. In that moment of certain defeat, his hand pressed against his chest where Cassia's wooden bird lay hidden. Through the haze of pain came perfect clarity, not just of what he fought for, but of who he had become during their weeks together. No longer merely Rome's champion gladiator, but a man who had rediscovered his capacity for loyalty, trust, and love. The German raised his blade for the killing stroke, confident in his victory. Instead of attempting to block, Maximus lunged forward beneath the descending arc, driving his shoulder into Tudobad's midsection. The unexpected tactic disrupted the German's balance momentarily, enough for Maximus to roll clear and regain his footing. As they reset, Maximus's gaze caught a broken spear shaft half buried in the sand, debris from an earlier exhibition. In a move that defied conventional gladiatorial tactics, he deliberately discarded his gladius, diving for the broken spear instead. The crowd's confusion turned to disbelief as the champion armed himself with what appeared to be inferior weaponry against the German's formidable arsenal. Tudobad himself hesitated briefly, suspecting some trick in this apparent surrender of advantage. That hesitation provided the opening Maximus needed. Rather than engaging directly, he began a series of swift, unpredictable movements, neither attacking nor defending, but using the arena itself as his ally. The spear shaft struck support posts, kicked up blinding sand, and disrupted the German's methodical approach. Unable to establish his preferred combat rhythm, Tudobad grew increasingly frustrated, his calculated precision deteriorating into powerful but predictable attacks. When he committed fully to a lunging strike, Maximus executed the maneuver that would define his legacy. Using the broken spear as a vault, he launched himself above the German's blade, simultaneously driving the jagged spear end downward. The improvised weapon found the narrow gap between helmet and shoulder armor, penetrating with devastating effect. Tudobad crashed to his knees, blood pouring from the wound. His gladius fell from suddenly nerveless fingers as he stared up at Maximus with something approaching respect. The arena fell silent as Maximus retrieved his own blade and stood over his fallen opponent. Everyone expected, perhaps even hoped for, the killing stroke that would cement this as the most legendary combat in recent memory. Instead, Maximus turned toward the official's box and raised his gladius in the formal request for mercy. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some appreciating the magnanimity, others disappointed at being denied the final spectacle of death. From her position, Cassia saw Senator Gallus lean toward Praetor Lucius, speaking urgently. The praetor's response appeared firm as he extended his hand with thumb positioned horizontally, leaving the decision to the crowd. The audience's verdict came in a thunderous wave of extended thumbs, life granted to a worthy combatant, and recognition of a victory that transcended mere bloodshed. As arena slaves helped the injured German from the field, Maximus knelt in the bloody sand, his shattered body sustained only by will and the knowledge that Cassia watched. When he finally stood, his gaze found hers across the distance, a silent promise that whatever came next, they faced it together. The arena had emptied of spectators, yet Praetor Lucius remained in the official's box, engaged in what appeared to be intense negotiation with Senator Gallus. Below, medical slaves attended to Maximus's injuries, binding broken ribs and cleaning the reopened wounds on his thigh and chest. Batavus paced nearby, his expression alternating between triumph at the spectacular match and concern over the ongoing discussion above. When the praetor suddenly stood and raised his hand for silence, the lanista froze mid-stride. "By authority of my office and the provincial governorship of Rome," Lucius announced, his voice carrying the formal weight of legal proclamation, "I hereby convene an immediate review of contractual matters pertaining to the gladiator Maximus of Thrace." Guards moved to block the exits as the praetor descended to the arena floor, accompanied by a clerk carrying official documentation. Senator Gallus followed, his composure intact despite the unexpected development. "Bring the champion's contract records," Lucius ordered Batavus. "And the debt slave woman who attends him." Cassia was escorted forward from the slaves' area, her eyes briefly meeting Maximus's before lowering respectfully before the officials. Though she maintained the demeanor expected of her station, a subtle tension in her posture suggested readiness rather than submission. "Irregularities have been brought to my attention," the praetor continued once Batavus reluctantly produced a scroll case. "Concerning the terms of service for this gladiator." Senator Gallus stepped forward. "Praetor, while your diligence is commendable, this hardly seems the appropriate venue for administrative matters." "On the contrary, Senator." Lucius accepted the contracts from Batavus with a pointed look. "Where better to address justice than where it has been most visibly denied?" The clerk unrolled the documents, and the praetor examined them carefully. After several minutes of silent review, he looked up sharply. "These records indicate a 7-year term of service," he stated. Yet the provincial archives show the original indenture specified 5 years under the Lex Emilia. Batavis paled visibly. There were disciplinary extensions, which mysteriously lack the required countersignatures. The praetor held up one document where alterations were clearly visible. The authentication seals on these modifications appear inconsistent with official provincial markings. From his position among the medical slaves, Maximus watched in disbelief as the very fraud Cassia had discovered was now exposed through official channels. Somehow, their petition, or its equivalent, had reached the praetor despite Gallus's interference. Furthermore, Lucius continued, "My investigation reveals no record of the mandatory freedom consideration hearing required after 5 years of exemplary service. A fighter with 43 victories and no recorded infractions certainly qualifies as exemplary." Senator Gallus maintained his diplomatic poise. "Administrative oversights, surely, easily remedied through proper channels rather than this theatrical approach. Justice delayed is justice denied, Senator." The praetor turned to face Maximus directly. "By the authority of my office, I declare your legal term of service completed as of 2 years ago. You are, by law, entitled to immediate manumission." A murmur ran through the assembled ludus staff and guards. Such a declaration, delivered publicly and without the customary bureaucratic process, was unprecedented. Additionally, Lucius continued, "Roman law stipulates that any fighter held beyond their legal term is owed compensation for matches fought during that period. Batavis, your records indicate 28 matches since the legitimate completion of his service, each purse to be paid directly to him as a freedman." The lanista's face contorted with suppressed rage. "This is outrageous. The ludus will be ruined." "The alternative is prosecution for contract fraud," the praetor replied evenly, "which carries penalties far more severe than financial restitution." Throughout this exchange, Senator Gallus had been observing with the calculated patience of a seasoned politician. Now he stepped forward, apparently conceding to the inevitable but seeking to maintain control. "A just outcome," he agreed smoothly, "though it leaves unresolved the matter of the debt-slave woman, whose contract I have legally purchased." All eyes turned to Cassia, who remained outwardly composed despite the sudden attention. "Indeed." The praetor gestured for the contract to be presented. "I shall review those documents as well." As the senator's clerk provided the paperwork, Maximus struggled to sit upright despite his injuries. Everything they had fought for now balanced on the praetor's interpretation of yet another contract. Lucius examined the documents carefully, occasionally consulting with his own clerk in hushed tones. Finally, he looked up. "This contract cites original debt documents registered with the provincial tax authority," he noted. "However, upon review of those records, several inconsistencies emerge." He turned to Cassia directly. "Your initial indenture resulted from assuming your uncle's gambling debts, correct?" "Yes, praetor," she answered, her voice steady. "According to provincial law, debt transfer to blood relatives requires voluntary consent documented with a witness of good standing." He indicated a section of the contract. "This agreement lacks such verification." The praetor straightened, his decision visibly formed. Additionally, the ludus's documented contract violations create a situation of what our laws term unjust enrichment. In simple terms, an entity that has profited from illegal activities cannot enforce related contracts. He rolled the document closed with finality. "I therefore rule that the debt obligation is satisfied through the legal penalties assessed against the ludus. The woman is free of her indenture, effective immediately." Batavis sputtered protests while Senator Gallus maintained dignified silence, recognizing when a strategic retreat was necessary. The game had shifted beyond his ability to control its outcome. 3 months later, a modest home stood on the outskirts of Rome, far from the arena's roar yet close enough to the city for a freedman's business to thrive. Maximus, his body finally healed from years of combat, worked steadily at establishing a small training school for the sons of merchants seeking basic self-defense skills. In the inner courtyard, Cassia instructed 2 young women in letters and mathematics, daughters of neighboring families who valued education regardless of conventional expectations. Her reputation as a scribe's daughter with exceptional literacy had spread quietly among those seeking quality instruction. As evening approached, they met in the simple atrium where a small shrine housed 2 significant items: the wooden bird that had been her father's final gift, and a formal marriage contract tablet recording their legal connubium, the right of legitimate marriage between freed persons. Another arrived today, Maximus noted, indicating a young man sleeping in the small adjacent room. Former arena slave from the Capuan ludus. Says he heard we sometimes offer shelter. Cassia nodded, unsurprised. What had begun as a personal journey to freedom had evolved into something larger, a quiet refuge for those discarded by Rome's brutal entertainments. "I need loyalty, you need protection," she quoted softly, recalling his words from their first meeting. A simple transaction that changed everything. Maximus took her hand, the gladiator's calluses slowly giving way to those of a craftsman and teacher. Not a transaction anymore. "No," she agreed, her finger tracing the marriage contract's inscription. "Something far stronger." Outside, the sun set on a Rome that continued its grand, indifferent progress, building monuments to its glory while forgetting the small victories of those who found freedom not through conquest, but through loyalty, courage, and love that transcended the arena's brutal calculus.